Hello guys and welcome to a Battlefield 5 settings guide. I've been asked numerous times what my settings are, even on Battlefield 1 back in the day. So I decided to make a video about my settings and just some general tips on how you can adjust your settings to fit your playstyle. And I'm going to be going through my settings as well. So here we go. Alright, before we get into the specific settings, just a general tip is to just copy your Battlefield 1 settings over and take it from there and make some minor adjustments. That's what I did and it worked for me. In the controls section of the settings we have invert vertical look, which is personal preference, minus off, and then we have soldier aim sensitivity. My settings are centered around an aggressive playstyle. I like high sensitivity and high field of view. So my sensitivity is on 60%, which is not low. And if you're a more passive player, be sure to take your sensitivity down to 30%. And if you want to increase it, then just increase it by 5 every time. And if you get used to the increased sensitivity, just increase it by 5 until you feel like you've reached a good level. If you're an extremely aggressive player, take it up to like 80% and see how it feels for you. And soldier zoom aim sensitivity is when you aim down sight. Mine's on 160%, and pretty self-explanatory. The highest sensitivity, the more aggressive playstyle, or even for some passive players, they like to have high sensitivity as well. But in general, lower sensitivity equals more passive playstyle. Soldier sprint, that's personal preference. Mine is just in toggle because you don't want to hold down sprint the whole time if you're on. And then double tap forward to sprint, personal preference. Soldier, weapon zoom, hold, toggle, personal preference. Steady scope, personal preference. Vehicle sensitivity, I like it on 50%, not too high, not too low. And vehicle weapon zoom, personal preference between toggle and hold. Invert vertical flight, also personal preference. If we go to control schemes, make sure to have your soldier buttons on alternate. That will make your slide as R3 and your melee as circle. So you can make some nice outplays in a one-on-one gunfight and get the upper hand on your opponent if you slide or crouch in a gunfight using just R3 without taking your thumb off the right stick at all. And the rest of mine just on default. At advanced, we have stick aiming acceleration. Make sure that's 0. You don't want any input lag from whenever you're turning. You want to be dead on target the whole time, so make sure that's 0. Uniform soldier aiming, mine's off. That's basically all your sensitivities when aiming down sights with any sort of weapon, with any sort of scope or sight, will be the same sensitivity. So that's when you want everything the same, so to say. And then that coefficient, just keep that as it is, don't change that setting. Vehicle aim relative controls, mine is off, but there's just personal preference. Both these vehicle settings are personal preference. You can just test and see which one works for you. Don't change any of these aim settings for any sight or any zoom sensitivity. Don't change any of those. Don't have to change any of these as well, except if you want to fine tweak, you can increase the tank sensitivity and the default turret sensitivity as well if you want to turn a bit quicker and so forth. If we go to controller tuning, vibration off, you want your controller vibrating when you're aiming and trying to get a specific shot in a player, and then due to the vibration you miss your target. Center dead zone, mine's on 11%. Good range for both of the left stick and the right stick are between 10 and I'd say 20. Mine's on 11. Make sure your left stick is exactly the same as the right stick. do not change your actual dead zone. It's 15 by default. Don't change your max input threshold. Center dead zone 11. Don't change this one, and don't change this one as well. Controller Alt2 and R2 buttons, make sure it's on 0%, 5%, 0%, 5%, the minimum it can be, because you don't any input lag. If you press down R2 or L2, the button will click instantly, if you get what I'm saying. So there's no input lag whatsoever. It's really quick. And this is controls. In the gameplay section of the settings, it is mostly personal preference settings, so I'm just going to be showing my settings, and this is what my personal preference is. Show HUD, personal preference. HUD motion, personal preference as well. Player created content, that's personal preference, such as emblems, tags, platoon names. Chat log, personal preference, if you want to see the chat log. Magnify chat, personal preference, mine's on off. Inventory always, well, when active, personal preference. Crosshair visibility, make sure that's always 100%. You always want to see your crosshairs. And your crosshair color, make sure it's a color that stands out in the environment, so you can always see your crosshairs and don't get confused with the environment in the background, so you don't know where your crosshairs are, because that's a thing. I'd recommend like a bright neon color that'll, like I said, stand out in the background. Kill log, personal preference, I like mine on show. Kill log filter all icon, this is personal preference as well. All these settings over here are personal preference. I didn't change any of these. The hit indicators, this is also personal preference, but I changed my headshot color to blue and the kill color to red, so I know exactly when I got a headshot. When I got a blue hit marker for a headshot, I don't really need to get another headshot, so I can just body shot, because chances are he's already damaged a lot. And then just kill color, personal preference. Damage based shape, basically the more damage you do to an enemy, the bigger your crosshairs will become. Personal preference on or off. Armor hit indicator color, personal preference, mine's on yellow. This is when you're hitting armor. And on the minimap, the only thing I changed on the minimap was the minimap size. If you're a bit more competitive, you want to see what's going on around you, if you check your minimap regularly, I'd recommend like 120% is a good number. And then downstairs here, the default icon opacity for friendly, objective, enemy, gadget. Mine is on 90%, because not fully 100%. If in case there's an enemy in front of you and there's an objective behind the enemy, you're going to be seeing the objective and not the enemy, because if it's on 100%, you'll only be seeing that objective and not the enemy in front of you. You don't want that. Aim down sights, icon opacity, I didn't really change that, that was fine. It's same basic stuff. Advanced, this is where only thing I really changed was aim assist rotation off, but auto soldier leaning, that's personal preference. Peek over, personal preference. Parachute auto deploy, personal preference. Context based order giving, that's also personal preference. I'd personally always have it on. Means if you look at an objective, instead of using R1 and down to send orders to your squad, you can just press R1 whilst aiming to the flag, and it'll mark the flag, if you get what I'm saying. And then plane, camera, chase, roll, personal preference. Rotation, if you're a competitive player, make sure that's off. If you're a casual player, doesn't matter. But if you want to improve your aim, make sure auto rotation is always off. Slowdown on, it's no use playing with it off. Everyone plays with it on. And what it basically does is if you aim on an enemy, or if your crosshairs hovers over an enemy, your sensitivity will be decreased. And that's all that slowdown does. Reload int, personal preference, hint system, network, performance graph, and aim lead indicator, all personal preference. In the video settings, we have brightness, which is on 70% for me. I would not recommend for you guys to go below 50%, as it'll be difficult for you guys to see the players hiding in the dark corners of the map. So mine is on 70%, and depending on your monitor settings, you can change it accordingly. Field of view next. My field of view personally is max. It's a very acquired taste to play with max field of view. I'd say the good average to go to is 90 horizontal field of view there on the right side, which means you'll have to put it on 74. That's a good average to have. And field of view basically just means you can see more to the left and the right of your screen around you, but also your targets where you're aiming at become smaller the higher you go with field of view. And also a thing to note, if you change your field of view, it will affect your sensitivity, because you'll get the illusion of running faster with higher field of view, and you'll get the illusion of turning slower when you have higher field of view. So if you have a very low field of view with high sensitivity, it'll feel super quick when you turn around, but when you're on max field of view with the same sensitivity, it'll not feel that quick at all. So just one thing to note, your sensitivity will change. It will feel different if you change your field of view. Vehicle third person field of view, that's personal preference. Mine's on 80. Maybe a good average to go for is 90 again, but the higher the better, because you don't have to be that accurate with the tank. You can just splash damage the enemies. Aim down sights field of view basically means when you aim down sights, your field of view effect will apply to your weapon. If it's off, then your weapon will be zooming in if you aim down sights. Mine is on. Motion blur 0%. I don't like motion blur. That's personal preference though. Aim down sights, depth of field effect, that's personal preference. Mine is on. Means if you aim down sights, your weapon will be, half of your weapon will be in blur, the parts where your sights are not. But that's personal preference. Custom controller or custom color settings, that's all personal preference. If for colorblind, that's personal preference. All these settings at the bottom, I just got them off, but that's personal preference. I'd like to say I get better performance if you have all of them off, but I'm not sure, to be honest. But like I said, mine is all off. And that is the settings guide. Thank you for tuning in, guys, and be sure to like and subscribe for more Battlefield 5 videos.